Before start, please subscribe our channel Pause Verve for more heart-touching stories of puppies and dogs. A lone firefighter trudges through the city's twilight, unaware that a scruffy puppy trailing him carries a desperate secret. What plea for help awaits, and why does this tiny dog refuse to give up? The city hummed with restless energy as Michael Carter trudged down 7th Avenue, his heavy boots scuffing against the uneven sidewalk. Dusk painted the sky in streaks of orange and purple, but the glow of neon signs and the distant wail of sirens drowned out any sense of calm. At 34, Michael was no stranger to the chaos of urban life. As a firefighter with the city's busiest station, he'd spent the last 12 hours battling a warehouse blaze that left his muscles aching, and his navy uniform dusted with ash. His short brown hair clung to his forehead, damp with sweat, and his hazel eyes, usually bright with quiet determination, were dulled by exhaustion. All Michael could think about was the sanctuary of his small apartment 6 blocks away. A modest, one-bedroom with a sagging couch and a coffee maker that sputtered like it was on its last legs. It wasn't much, but it was his. The thought of collapsing onto that couch, maybe with a cold beer and the low hum of a baseball game on TV, kept his feet moving. Yet, beneath the fatigue, a familiar ache gnawed at him. Another shift done, another day survived. But for what? The station was his life, his crew, his family. But when the alarms fell silent and the adrenaline faded, Michael felt the weight of his solitude. He'd always been the guy who showed up, who carried the hose, who pulled people from danger. But who was there for him when the lights went out? The city didn't care about his thoughts. It pulsed around him, indifferent. Street vendors hawked sizzling hot dogs, their voices blending with the chatter of pedestrians and the occasional honk of a taxi stuck in traffic. A young couple laughed as they spilled out of a diner, their hands intertwined, oblivious to the world. Michael's gaze lingered on them for a moment before he looked away, shoving his hands deeper into the pockets of his jacket. Connection like that felt like a language he'd forgotten how to speak. He'd had a few relationships over the years, but the job always came first. Long hours, unpredictable calls, and the constant shadow of risk didn't leave much room for anything else. Most days, he told himself he was fine with it. Most days, he almost believed it. The air carried a crisp edge, the first hint of autumn settling over the city. Michael pulled his jacket tighter, the station's emblem on the sleeve catching the light from a flickering street lamp. The sidewalk was cracked, in places, weeds pushing through like stubborn reminders of resilience. He passed a bodega with its familiar jingle playing as the door swung open, releasing the scent of fresh coffee and baked goods. Normally, he'd stop for a quick chat with Mrs. Rivera, the owner, who always slipped an extra donut into his bag, with a wink. But tonight, his body begged for rest, and he kept walking, head down, lost in the rhythm of his steps. That's when he heard it. A soft, persistent sound, like the patter of tiny feet against concrete. It was faint at first, easy to dismiss amidst the city's clamor, but it grew steadier, closer. Michael slowed, glancing over his shoulder. Nothing. Just the usual crowd. A jogger with earbuds, a woman pushing a stroller, a delivery guy weaving. Through on a bike. He shook his head, chalking it up to exhaustion, playing tricks. He'd been on his feet too long, seen too much smoke, heard too many alarms. The mind could conjure all sorts of nonsense after a shift like that. But the sound didn't stop. If anything, it grew more distinct, a deliberate tap-tap-tap that seemed to shadow his every step. Michael stopped abruptly, turning fully this time, his brow furrowing. There, a few paces behind, sat a small, scruffy puppy. Its grey fur was matted, streaked with dirt, and one ear flopped over while the other stood at an odd angle, giving it a lopsided charm. The puppy's ribs showed faintly beneath its thin coat, but its eyes, big, round, and a deep amber, locked onto Michael with an intensity that made his breath catch. It wasn't just hunger or fear in those eyes. There was something else, something almost human, like the puppy had a purpose. "Hey, little guy," Michael said, his voice rough from the day's shouting over sirens. He crouched slightly, expecting the puppy to bolt. Strays weren't uncommon in the city, but they usually kept their distance, skittish and wary. This one didn't move. It tilted its head, tail giving a tentative wag, and stayed put, watching him as if it had been waiting for him all along. Michael waved a hand dismissively. "Go on, get home. You don't want to follow me." The puppy didn't budge. Instead, it took a cautious step forward, its tiny paws barely making a sound now, as if testing his resolve. Michael straightened, running a hand through his hair. He wasn't a dog person, or at least he didn't think he was. His apartment barely had room for him, let alone a pet, and his schedule was a nightmare. Besides, this puppy probably belonged to someone, right? Someone who'd lost track of it in the chaos of the city. He scanned the street for anyone looking frantic, anyone calling out a name, but no one seemed to notice the little creature staring up at him. The puppy took another step closer, its eyes never leaving his, and Michael felt an unexpected tug in his chest, a mix of curiosity and something softer, something he wasn't ready to name. "All right, buddy," he muttered, starting to walk again, slower this time. "I'm not your guy, find someone else." But as he moved, the pattering resumed, steady and unyielding. The puppy was following him, keeping a careful distance but never straying. Michael glanced back, and there it was, trotting along with a determination that seemed far too big for its small frame. A faint smile tugged at his lips despite himself. Whoever this puppy was, it wasn't giving up easily. Michael Carter kept walking, his boots thudding against the sidewalk, but his pace slowed as the soft patter of the puppy's paws trailed him like a persistent echo. The city's pulse hadn't changed. Neon lights buzzed, a street musician strummed a guitar in the distance, and the scent of roasted chestnuts wafted from a nearby cart. But Michael's attention was no longer on the world around him. It was on the scruffy grey puppy that refused to leave his side. Every few steps he glanced back, half expecting the little creature to have vanished into the urban sprawl. But there it was, trotting along with its lopsided ears bouncing, its amber eyes fixed on him with unwavering focus. "Come on, kid," Michael muttered, his voice softer now, tinged with amusement. "You've got better things to do than follow a guy like me." He waved a hand, shooing the air as if that might convince the puppy to scamper off. The puppy tilted its head, its one floppy ear flopping further, and let out a small, almost indignant huff. It didn't budge, just sat there on the cracked sidewalk, tail sweeping the ground in tiny, hopeful arcs. Michael chuckled despite himself, the sound surprising him. He couldn't remember the last time he'd laughed after a shift. The exhaustion still clung to him, but something about this stubborn little stray was chipping away at it. He started walking again, crossing a busy intersection where yellow taxis honked and pedestrians jostled for space. The puppy followed, weaving through legs and dodging a skateboarder with a nimbleness that belied its scrawny frame. Michael's curiosity grew with every block. This wasn't normal stray behavior. Most street dogs he'd seen were skittish, darting away at the slightest movement. This one, it was like it had picked him, like it had a mission. The thought was absurd, but those eyes, sharp, searching, almost pleading, made it hard to dismiss. At the corner of 9th Street, Michael stopped under the glow of a flickering street lamp. The puppy halted too, keeping its careful distance, but its posture shifted, as if sensing a moment. Michael crouched down, resting his elbows on his knees, and studied the little creature. Its fur was a mess, clumped with dirt and what looked like dried mud. Its ribs were faintly visible, and a small nick on its upright ear hinted at a rough life. Yet there was a quiet dignity in the way it sat, chin slightly raised, watching him right back. "What's your deal, huh?" Michael asked, his tone gentle, almost coaxing. The puppy's tail gave a single, deliberate wag, and it inched closer, just enough to close half the gap between them. Michael's gaze dropped to the puppy's neck, where a tattered leather collar hung loosely, barely holding together. No tags jingled, no name was etched into the worn material, but something caught his eye. A small folded piece of paper tucked into the collar, crumpled and stained. His heart gave a strange lurch. A note? Who puts a note on a stray dog? He reached out slowly, palm open, expecting the puppy to flinch. It didn't. It trembled slightly but held its ground, those amber eyes locked on his, trusting yet urgent. "Easy now," Michael murmured, his fingers brushing the collar. The tucked puppy stayed still, as if it knew this was the moment it had been waiting for. His calloused fingers fumbled with the paper, careful not to tear it. The street lamp's dim light made it hard to see, but he could feel the weight of something important in his hands. He glanced at the puppy, who was now standing, tail wagging faintly, as if encouraging him to hurry. Michael's throat tightened. This wasn't just a lost dog. This was something more, something that made the hairs on the back of his neck stand up. He unfolded the paper, his breath catching as he squinted at the words scrawled in uneven, childish handwriting. The city's noise faded, and for a moment it was just him, the puppy, and the message that would change everything. Michael Carter's fingers trembled slightly as he unfolded the crumpled note under the flickering street lamp, the city's hum fading into a distant murmur. The scruffy grey puppy sat patiently at his feet, its amber eyes glinting with an urgency that made his pulse quicken. The paper was worn, its edges frayed as if it had been handled too many times, and the childish handwriting scrawled across. It was shaky, written in smudged pencil. Michael's breath caught as he read the words, "Please help, my sister is sick. No food. Apt 4C. Each letter felt like a punch, raw and desperate, carrying the weight of a plea no child should ever have to make. He read it again, his heart hammering against his ribs. The exhaustion from his 12-hour shift at the fire station vanished, replaced by a surge of adrenaline that sharpened his senses. The puppy let out a soft whine, nudging his knee with its nose as if to say, "Hurry." Michael's eyes darted to the little creature, its matted fur and lopsided ears suddenly seeming less like a stray's quirks and more like badges of courage. This wasn't just a dog that had wandered into his path. It was a messenger, a tiny hero carrying a cry for help. The realization hit him like a spark catching flame. Someone was in trouble, and this puppy had chosen him to fix it. Apt 4C, Michael muttered, scanning the street for a landmark to orient himself. His mind raced, piecing together the city's grid. He knew this neighborhood well, had responded to calls in its maze of tenements and brownstones. The address wasn't far, 3 blocks east, maybe 4. He stuffed the note into his jacket pocket, his fingers brushing against the station's emblem, as if grounding himself for what came next. "All right, buddy," he said to the puppy, his voice low but firm. "Show me the way." The puppy's tail gave a vigorous wag, and it stood, paws shifting eagerly, ready to lead. Michael broke into a jog, his boots pounding the pavement. The puppy bounded ahead, its small form surprisingly swift despite its thin frame. The city blurred around them, neon signs, honking taxis, and the chatter of passers-by fading into a backdrop of urgency. Michael's training kicked in, the same focus that guided him through smoke-filled buildings now driving him toward an unknown crisis. Who wrote the note? A child, clearly, but how young? And the sister. How sick was she? The words, "no food," gnawed at him, conjuring images of empty cabinets and hollowed faces. He pushed the thoughts aside, focusing on the puppy's grey tail bobbing just ahead, a beacon in the twilight. They turned onto a quieter street, where the buildings grew shabbier, their brick facades chipped and windows patched with cardboard. The puppy slowed, glancing back to ensure Michael was still with it, then veered toward a looming apartment complex. Its faded sign read, "Riverside Arms," though there was nothing grand about it. Paint peeled in long strips, and the security door hung ajar, its lock long broken. The puppy didn't hesitate, slipping through the gap and trotting into the dimly lit foyer. Michael followed, his senses on high alert, the note's words echoing in his mind, "Please help." Inside, the air was thick with the musty scent of mildew and neglect. A single fluorescent bulb buzzed overhead, casting a sickly glow on peeling wallpaper and cracked linoleum. The puppy's nails clicked against the floor as it led him up a narrow staircase, its determination unwavering. Michael's chest tightened with each step, his firefighter's instincts screaming that time was running out. The puppy stopped at the third-floor landing, turning to a door marked 4C in tarnished brass. It pawed at the threshold, whining, softly, its eyes flicking to Michael with a look that seemed to say, "This is it." Michael knelt beside the puppy, his hand resting briefly on its trembling back. "Good job, little guy," he whispered, his voice steady despite the storm of emotions inside him. He stood, squaring his shoulders, and raised his fist to knock. The sound echoed in the silent hallway, sharp and final. No answer came, but the puppy's whine grew more insistent, its small body pressing against the door. Michael's heart pounded. Whatever was waiting on the other side, he knew one thing for certain. He couldn't walk away. Michael Carter stood before the door, marked 4C, his fist still hovering from the unanswered knock. The scruffy grey puppy pawed frantically at the threshold, its whines piercing the heavy silence of the Riverside Arms' grimy hallway. The note's words, "Please help. My sister is sick. No food." Apt 4C burned in Michael's mind, each syllable fueling the urgency coursing through him. The flickering fluorescent light above cast jagged shadows, and the stale air clung to his skin. But all he could focus on was the door and the unknown crisis waiting beyond it. His firefighter's instincts screamed that every second counted. He knocked again, harder this time, the sound rattling the flimsy frame. "Hello, anyone there?" His voice was steady, trained to carry through chaos, but the silence that followed felt wrong, too complete, too heavy. The puppy's whines turned to a sharp bark, its small body trembling with impatience. Michael's hand moved to the doorknob, testing it. Locked. He glanced at the puppy, whose amber eyes seemed to plead, "Do something." His jaw tightened. He'd broken down doors before, flames roaring, smoke choking the air, but this was different. This was a child's cry for help, carried by a dog no bigger than a loaf of bread. "Hold on, buddy," Michael said, more to himself than the puppy. He stepped back, assessing the door. It was old. The wood splintered near the lock, the kind of cheap build that wouldn't hold up to much force. He took a deep breath, adrenaline sharpening his focus, and positioned himself. With a swift kick, just below the knob, the door burst inward, splintering with a sharp crack. The puppy darted inside before Michael could stop it, its nails clicking against the floor as it disappeared into the gloom. The smell hit him first, a thick, oppressive mix of unwashed bodies, spoiled food, and neglect that made his stomach lurch. Michael stepped inside, his eyes adjusting to the dimness. A single bulb hung from the ceiling, its weak light barely reaching the corners of the cramped apartment. The living room was a wasteland. A sagging couch with torn cushions, a coffee table littered with empty cans, and a bare mattress in one corner, its springs poking through. The wallpaper peeled like shedding skin, and a draft from a cracked window carried the chill of the autumn night. "Anyone here?" Michael called, his voice softer now, cautious. The puppy's barking drew his attention to the far corner, where the light barely reached. There, huddled against the wall, were two small figures. A boy, no older than 9, sat with his knees drawn up, his thin arms wrapped protectively around a toddler. The boy's eyes were huge in his gaunt face, reflecting the faint light like a cornered animal's. His dark hair was matted and his clothes hung loose, stained and oversized. The toddler in his arms was unnaturally still, her tiny chest rising and falling rapidly, her cheeks flushed with an alarming fever. Michael's heart clenched. The boy flinched as their eyes met, pulling the toddler closer, his whole body trembling. "It's okay," Michael said, raising his hands to show he meant no harm. "I'm here to help. My name's Michael." He moved slowly, kneeling a few feet away to avoid scaring them further. The puppy, sensing the tension, trotted to the boy and nudged his hand with its nose, tail wagging gently. The boy's grip on the toddler eased slightly, his gaze flickering between Michael and the puppy, as if trying to decide who to trust. "What's your name?" Michael asked, keeping his voice calm despite the urgency clawing at him. The boy swallowed hard, his lips cracked and dry. "Ethan," he whispered, barely audible. "This is Lily." He nodded toward the toddler, whose eyes were half closed, her breathing shallow. Michael's training kicked in, his eyes scanning Lily's flushed face, her limp body, dehydration, fever, maybe worse. They needed help now. "I'm gonna call." "For help, Ethan," Michael said, pulling out his phone. "We're gonna take care of Lily, okay?" Ethan nodded faintly, his eyes never leaving Michael's face. As Michael dialed 911, relaying the address and the children's condition, the puppy curled up beside Ethan, its small body a quiet anchor. Michael's voice stayed steady, but inside, a storm raged, anger at whoever had left these kids like this, fear for Lily's life and a growing resolve to protect them. The puppy's unwavering presence, its courage in leading him here, felt like a promise he had to keep. Michael Carter knelt in the dim, fetid apartment, his phone pressed to his ear as he relayed urgent details to the 911 dispatcher. 2 kids, apartment 4C, Riverside Arms. Girl about 2, high fever, unresponsive. Boy maybe 9, malnourished. Send paramedics now. His voice was steady, a firefighter's calm forged in countless emergencies, but his heart pounded as he looked at Ethan and Lily. The toddler's shallow breaths and flushed cheeks screamed medical emergency, while Ethan's wide, fearful eyes betrayed a trauma deeper than hunger. The scruffy grey puppy, now pressed against Ethan's side, whined. Softly, its amber gaze flicking between the boy and Michael as if urging action. Hanging up, Michael pocketed his phone and leaned closer, keeping his movements slow. Ethan, help's coming, okay? Paramedics are on their way for Lily. Ethan nodded, his thin arms tightening around his sister, who lay limp in his lap. Her tiny body felt too warm, her eyelids fluttering but not opening. Michael's training kicked in, check vitals, assess the scene. But this wasn't a fire call. These were kids, abandoned in a place that reeked of despair. The apartment's barrenness told a grim story. Empty cabinets, a fridge with nothing but a moldy jar, a crib with soiled sheets. A crumpled note in the trash caught his eye, its words chilling. We'll be back when we can, take care of her. No signature, no timeline, just abandonment. Ethan, Michael said gently, can you tell me what happened? How long have you been alone? Ethan's lips trembled, but he didn't speak, his gaze dropping to the puppy. The little dog nuzzled his hand, and Ethan's fingers curled into its matted fur, drawing a shaky breath. A while, he mumbled. Mom left, he said she'd get help, didn't come back. The words were a knife to Michael's chest. How long was a while? Days? Weeks? The boy's gaunt frame and Lily's condition suggested too long. Michael's eyes scanned Ethan's face, cracked lips, hollow cheeks, a bruise fading on his forearm. He wanted to ask more, to understand how a child had shouldered this burden, but Lily's labored breathing demanded focus. You did good, Ethan, he said instead, his voice firm with reassurance. You kept her safe. And now I'm here to help. The puppy wagged its tail as if in agreement, and Ethan's shoulders relaxed a fraction, though his grip on Lily didn't loosen. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder. Michael stood, moving to the broken door to flag the paramedics. The puppy stayed with Ethan, its small body a steady presence. Moments later, 2 paramedics burst in, their equipment rattling. Over here, Michael called, stepping aside, but staying close. The lead medic, a woman with a calm demeanor, knelt beside Lily, checking her pulse and temperature. Severe dehydration, she muttered to her partner. Fever's high. Could be infection. We need to move. Ethan's eyes widened as the medic gently lifted Lily from his arms. No, he cried, scrambling to his feet, his voice cracking with panic. She needs me. Michael knelt beside him, placing a hand on his shoulder. They're taking her to the hospital, Ethan. They'll help her. We'll follow right behind, I promise. Ethan's gaze darted to the puppy, who pressed against his leg, and then to Michael, searching for truth. Something in Michael's steady expression must have convinced him, because he nodded, though his hands shook. The paramedics secured Lily on a stretcher, attaching an IV line as they moved. Michael guided Ethan out of the apartment, the boy clutching, his sleeve like a lifeline. The puppy trotted beside them, its nails clicking on the linoleum, never straying from Ethan's side. Downstairs, the ambulance's red lights flashed, cutting through the dusk. Michael helped Ethan into the back, where he sat close to Lily's stretcher, his small hand hovering near her tiny one. The puppy jumped up, curling into Ethan's lap, and the medic didn't object, perhaps sensing the dog's role in keeping. The boy grounded. As the ambulance sped toward the hospital, Michael sat beside Ethan, his mind racing. Who had left these kids to fend for themselves? How had a puppy become their only hope? The answers would come later. For now he focused on Ethan's trembling form and Lily's fragile breaths, vowing to see them through. the puppy's quiet presence, its unwavering loyalty, felt like a spark of hope in the darkness, a reminder that even the smallest creatures could carry the weight of a miracle. The ambulance's sirens wailed through the city, slicing through the dusk as Carter sat beside Ethan, the 9-year-old boy whose world had just collapsed. Ethan's thin fingers gripped Michael's sleeve, his knuckles white, while his other hand rested on the scruffy grey puppy curled in his lap. The puppy's amber eyes stayed fixed on Ethan, its small body a steady anchor amidst the chaos. From them, paramedics worked swiftly on Lily, the 2-year-old girl hooked to an IV, her tiny chest rising and falling with shallow breaths. The beeping of medical equipment filled the cramped space, each sound a reminder of how fragile her condition was. Michael's firefighter training kept him calm, but his heart ached for the siblings, abandoned in a rotting apartment with only a brave little dog to save them. "Ethan," Michael said softly, leaning closer to catch the boy's gaze. "You're doing great. Lily's in good hands." Ethan's eyes, wide and haunted, flicked to him, then back to his sister. He didn't speak, but his grip on Michael's sleeve tightened, a silent plea not to leave. The puppy nudged Ethan's hand, its tail giving a faint wag, and Michael marveled at the dog's instinct to comfort. He didn't know how this stray had found him, or why it had carried Ethan's desperate note, but its loyalty was undeniable. It had led him to these kids, and now it was holding Ethan together. The ambulance screeched to a stop at St. Mary's Hospital, and the doors flew open. Paramedics rushed Lily through the emergency entrance, rattling off terms like hypovolemia and febrile state to waiting staff. Ethan tried to follow, his sneakers slipping on the polished floor, but a nurse gently blocked his path. "She needs to go to the treatment area," the nurse explained. Ethan's face crumpled and he lunged forward, crying, "I have to stay with her." Michael caught him gently by the shoulders, kneeling to his level. "They need space to help Lily," he said, his voice steady but kind. "We'll wait right here, okay? I'm not going anywhere." Ethan's trembling eased slightly, and the puppy pressed against his leg, whining softly. They moved to the waiting room, a sterile space with worn vinyl chairs and a buzzing fluorescent light. Ethan sat ramrod straight, the puppy at his feet, its tail thumping anxiously. Michael pulled out a granola bar from his jacket pocket, a leftover from his shift. "Hungry?" he asked. Ethan shook his head, but his stomach growled, betraying him. Michael set the bar in Ethan's hand, noticing how his fingers shook as he unwrapped it, eating slowly, as if afraid it might disappear. The puppy watched, its nose twitching but didn't beg, instead resting its chin on Ethan's knee. 2 women approached, their badges identifying them as social workers. The older one, Ms. Harper, carried a clipboard, her expression professional but warm. "We need to discuss temporary arrangements," she began, glancing at Ethan. The boy stiffened, pressing closer to Michael, and the puppy stood, positioning itself between Ethan and the women, its small frame protective. Michael felt Ethan's fear like a physical weight. "Can we talk over there?" he asked Ms. Harper, nodding to a corner. She agreed, and Michael stood, giving Ethan's shoulder a reassuring squeeze. "I'll be right back." In the corner, Ms. Harper outlined the next steps. An emergency foster home was available for both children while they investigated the parents' whereabouts. Michael's stomach churned at the thought of Ethan and Lily being sent to strangers. He looked back at Ethan, who was stroking the puppy's fur, his eyes darting nervously. The boy had been through too much: abandonment, hunger, the weight of keeping his sister alive. And that puppy, that scruffy little hero, had been his only ally. Michael's resolve hardened. "I want to foster them," he said, surprising himself with the certainty in his voice. Ms. Harper raised an eyebrow. "Fostering is a big commitment, Mr. Carter. There's paperwork, home studies." "I know," Michael interrupted, his gaze steady. "But those kids need someone they can trust, not another temporary stop." Ms. Harper studied him, then nodded slowly. "We'll start the process. For now, you can stay with them." Michael returned to Ethan, who looked up with a mix of hope and fear. "You okay?" Michael asked, sitting beside him. Ethan nodded, his fingers buried in the puppy's fur. The puppy licked his hand, drawing a ghost of a smile, and Michael knew he'd made the right choice. These kids, this dog, they were his responsibility now. The hospital waiting room was a cocoon of muted sounds, soft beeps from distant monitors, the shuffle of nurses' shoes, and the low hum of a vending machine in the corner. Michael Carter sat beside Ethan, the 9-year-old's small hand still clutching his sleeve, a lifeline in the sterile chaos of St. Mary's. The scruffy grey puppy, now a quiet sentinel at Ethan's feet, rested its chin on the boy's knee, its amber eyes watchful. Ethan's gaze was fixed on the double doors leading to the treatment area, where his 2-year-old sister, Lily, was being treated for severe dehydration and fever. The weight of the unknown pressed down on them, but Michael felt a growing certainty anchoring him to the moment. These kids needed him, and he wasn't going anywhere. Ethan hadn't spoken much since they'd arrived, his silence a shield against the fear etched into his gaunt face. Michael watched him, noting the way his fingers absently stroked the puppy's matted fur, a repetitive motion that seemed to keep him grounded. The boy's clothes were threadbare, his sneakers worn through at the toes, and dark circles shadowed. His eyes, evidence of sleepless nights and relentless worry. Michael's heart ached at the thought of Ethan carrying the burden of his sister's survival alone, with only a stray dog for company. That puppy, with its lopsided ears and unwavering loyalty, had somehow become Ethan's lifeline, and Michael's guide to this moment. "Hey, Ethan," Michael said gently, breaking the heavy silence. "You want some water or maybe a snack?" He gestured to the vending machine, hoping to coax the boy into eating more than the granola bar he'd barely touched. Ethan shook, his head, his stomach growling in protest. Michael didn't push, instead pulling a small pack of crackers from his jacket pocket, another shift left over. "Just in case," he said, setting them beside Ethan. The boy glanced at them, then at the puppy, who lifted its head, nose twitching. Ethan broke off a tiny piece and slipped it to the dog, who accepted it with a gentle lick. The gesture, small but deliberate, tugged at Michael's chest. Ethan was still caring for others even now. The social worker, Ms. Harper, returned, her clipboard now joined by a stack of forms. She sat across from them, her expression softening. As she looked at Ethan, "We've got a foster home lined up," she said, her voice careful. "It's temporary until we locate your parents or make other arrangements." Ethan's body tensed, his fingers digging into Michael's sleeve. The puppy sensed the shift, standing to press closer to Ethan's legs, its tail still. Michael felt the boy's fear like a physical force, a terror of being torn from the only stability he'd found tonight, him and the puppy. "They stay together, right?" Michael asked, his tone firm. Ms. Harper nodded. "Yes, we'll keep the siblings together." Ethan's breathing quickened, and he pressed himself against Michael's side, his small frame trembling. "I don't want to go," he whispered, so quiet Michael almost missed it. The words cracked something open in Michael's heart. He thought of his own lonely apartment, the empty evenings, the life he'd built around his job. Then he looked at Ethan, at the puppy's protective stance, at the hospital doors hiding Lily's fate. A decision he'd been circling all night solidified. "Ms. Harper," he said, meeting her eyes, "I meant what I said. I want to foster them, both of them, and the dog too." The puppy's ears perked, as if it understood. Ms. Harper adjusted, her glasses studying him. "It's not a simple process, Mr. Carter. Background checks, home visits, training, it takes time." Michael nodded, undeterred. "I get it. But these kids have been through enough. They need someone who's all in, not a revolving door." He glanced at Ethan, who was watching him now, his eyes wide with a flicker of hope. Ms. Harper tapped her pen against her clipboard, then gave a small smile. "We'll expedite the paperwork. For now, you can stay with them as their emergency." "Contact." Michael exhaled, relief mingling with resolve. He turned to Ethan, whose grip on his sleeve hadn't loosened. "Hear that, buddy? We're sticking together until Lily's better." Ethan didn't smile, but his shoulders relaxed, and he leaned slightly into Michael's side. The puppy wagged its tail, nuzzling Ethan's hand, and for the first time, Michael saw a spark of trust in the boy's eyes. The hospital clock ticked on, each second a step toward a future none of them could predict, but Michael knew one thing. He was ready to fight for these kids, just as the puppy had fought to bring him to them. The late afternoon sun spilled through the windows of Michael Carter's modest apartment, casting long shadows across the hardwood floor. Michael stood in the doorway of his spare room, now transformed into a makeshift bedroom for Ethan and Lily. A bunk bed with fresh blue sheets sat against one wall, a small crib tucked beside it, and a rocket-shaped nightlight glowed softly in. The outlet. The scruffy grey puppy, now named Scout by Ethan in a rare moment of openness at the hospital, padded around, sniffing the new space. Ethan, clutching Lily's car seat, hovered in the hallway, his 9-year-old frame tense as he scanned the room with wary eyes. Lily, recovering but still weak, slept soundly in the car seat, her tiny chest rising and falling with steady breaths. Michael had spent the last 2 days preparing, ever since the hospital cleared Lily for discharge, and Ms. Harper approved his emergency foster placement. His apartment, once a bachelor's haven of minimal furniture and takeout containers, now held stacks of diapers, a high chair, and a fridge stocked with kid-friendly foods, applesauce, peanut butter, and Ethan's favorite, chocolate milk. The social worker had warned him about the challenges ahead, trauma, adjustment, the legal maze of fostering, but Michael's resolve hadn't wavered. Ethan and Lily needed a home, and Scout, the puppy who'd led him to them, deserved one. "Too, Ethan, want to check out your room?" Michael asked, keeping his voice light. Ethan didn't move, his gaze darting to the bunk bed, then to the door, as if mapping an escape route. Scout trotted over, nudging Ethan's leg with a soft whine, and the boy's fingers twitched, brushing the puppy's lopsided ear. "You can pick top or bottom bunk," Michael added, gesturing to the bed, "or we can switch things around if you want." Ethan's lips parted, but no words came. Instead, he set Lily's car seat down carefully and stepped into the room, Scout at his heels. Michael watched as Ethan touched the bunk's railing, his movements cautious, like he was testing if it would vanish. The boy's silence spoke volumes. Years of instability had taught him not to trust new places or people. Michael's heart ached, but he kept his distance, letting Ethan explore. Scout, sensing the tension, flopped onto the floor near the crib, tail thumping. Ethan glanced at the puppy, then at the nightlight, its blue glow softening the room's edges. "It's nice," he mumbled, almost too quiet to hear. Michael smiled, a small victory in the long road ahead. That evening, Michael heated up macaroni and cheese, the kitchen filling with its warm, buttery scent. Ethan sat at the table, Lily in the high chair, her eyes brighter as she nibbled on soft peas. Scout lay under Ethan's chair, ever watchful. Michael slid a plate in front of Ethan, who stared at it, his fork unmoving. "Go ahead, it's yours," Michael said gently. Ethan's hand hesitated, then slowly picked up the fork, his movements deliberate, like he was waiting for the food to be taken away. Michael pretended not to notice, busying himself with Lily's bib, but the sight of Ethan tucking a roll under his sleeve, for later, Michael guessed, tightened his throat. After dinner, Michael showed Ethan how to work the crib's latch, hoping it would help him feel in control. But when he checked on them later, his heart clenched. Ethan hadn't chosen a bunk. Instead, he lay curled on the floor beside Lily's crib, Scout pressed against his chest, both of them tense even in sleep. A blanket was draped over Ethan's shoulders, untouched from where he'd left it on the bed. Michael moved quietly, pulling another blanket from the bunk and laying it gently over them. Ethan stirred, his fingers curling into Scout's fur, but didn't wake. Scout's eyes opened briefly, meeting Michael's with a quiet understanding, as if saying, "I've got him." Michael lingered in the doorway, the weight of his new reality settling in. This wasn't just about providing a roof or food. Ethan and Lily carried scars from abandonment, and trust would come slowly, if at all. Scout, with his unwavering loyalty, was their bridge, but Michael had to be their anchor. He thought of his own lonely nights, the emptiness he'd pushed aside with work. Now that emptiness had a purpose, to give these kids and this scruffy little hero a home where they could heal. As he turned off the hall light, leaving the nightlight's glow to guard them, Michael made a silent promise. He'd be there, no matter how long it took. The morning sun filtered through the kitchen blinds, painting stripes across the table, where Michael Carter set out a plate of pancakes, their golden edges sizzling from the griddle. Ethan sat stiffly, his 9-year-old frame hunched over a glass of chocolate milk, while 2-year-old Lily babbled in her high chair, smearing banana on her tray. Scout, the scruffy grey puppy, lay beneath Ethan's chair, his lopsided ears perked as he tracked every movement, tail sweeping the floor. It had been a week since Michael brought the siblings and their loyal dog to his apartment, and while Lily's health was improving, Ethan's guarded silence spoke of deeper wounds. Today was a new hurdle, Ethan's first day at school, and the tension in the air was palpable. "Ready for school, Ethan?" Michael asked, sliding a pancake onto the boy's plate. Ethan's fork paused mid-air, his eyes dropping to Scout, who nudged his leg with a soft whine. "Guess so," he mumbled, barely audible. Michael noticed the way Ethan's fingers tightened around the fork, his knuckles white. School meant new faces, new risks, and for a boy who'd spent months fending for himself and Lily, it was a leap into the unknown. Michael kept his tone light. "You'll do great, and Scout'll be waiting when you get home." Ethan glanced at the puppy, his expression softening, and gave a small nod. The walk to Lincoln Elementary was quiet, Ethan clutching his new backpack, its strap still stiff from the store. Scout couldn't come, and Ethan's steps slowed as they neared the school's brick facade, where kids laughed and chased each other across the playground. Michael rested a hand on Ethan's shoulder. "I'll pick you up at 3, okay?" Ethan nodded, but his eyes scanned the crowd like he was mapping threats. As he disappeared into the bustling hallway, Michael felt a pang of worry. Ethan was tough, but toughness born of survival wasn't the same as feeling safe. At home, Michael busied himself with Lily, who giggled as he stacked blocks with her, and Scout, who paced by the door whining for Ethan. But when 3 o'clock came, Ethan emerged from school with his head down, his backpack slung low. "How'd it go?" Michael asked, handing him a juice box. Ethan shrugged, his fingers finding Scout's leash as the puppy bounded to greet him, tail wagging furiously. "Fine," he said, but the tightness in his voice told another story. Michael didn't press, hoping time would loosen the boy's guard. Days turned into a routine, but school remained a battleground. Ethan's teacher, Mrs. Lopez, called Michael after a week. "He's quiet, keeps to himself," she said. "Some kids, they've noticed there was an incident at recess." Michael's stomach sank. That evening, he found Ethan in the backyard, tossing a ball for Scout, his throws harder than necessary. "Want to talk about it?" Michael asked, sitting on the porch steps. Ethan's jaw clenched, but Scout nudged his hand, and the words spilled out. "They called me weird," said Scout's a mangy mutt. His voice cracked, anger and hurt tangled together. Michael leaned forward, keeping his tone steady. "Kids can be mean when they don't understand, but you know what? Scout's a hero. He saved you and Lily, led me right to you. That's more than those kids could ever dream of." Ethan's eyes flicked to Scout, who dropped the ball at his feet, tail wagging. A faint smile tugged at Ethan's lips, the first Michael had seen in days. "Yeah," Ethan said softly, picking up the ball. "He's the best." That weekend, Michael took Ethan to a park, Scout trotting proudly on his leash. When a soccer game broke out among some kids, Ethan hung back, but Scout had other plans. The puppy chased a stray ball, barking playfully, and returned it to Ethan, who hesitated before kicking it back. One of the kids, a boy with glasses, grinned. "Cool dog, wanna play?" Ethan froze, but Scout's enthusiastic yips pushed him forward. By the time they left, Ethan's cheeks were flushed from running, and he'd exchanged names with the boy, Tommy. At home, he recounted the game to Lily, his voice brighter, and Scout curled up beside him, content. Michael watched from the kitchen, a warmth spreading in his chest. Ethan's walls were still high, but Scout was chipping away at them, and Michael's steady presence was laying a foundation. The road ahead would be long: school, trust, the looming question of their parents, but for now, Ethan's small smile and Scout's loyal companionship were enough. The autumn breeze rustled through the trees outside Michael Carter's apartment, scattering golden leaves across the small backyard, where Ethan kicked a soccer ball with Scout, the scruffy grey puppy, bounding after it with joyful barks. Inside, 2-year-old Lily clapped from her high chair, her giggles filling the kitchen, as Michael chopped vegetables for dinner. It had been a month since he'd found Ethan and Lily in that desolate apartment, led there by Scout's desperate mission. Ethan's haunted look had softened, his laughter more frequent, but shadows of his past lingered in his quiet moments, and Michael knew healing was a marathon, not a sprint. Ethan's progress at school was steady but fragile. He'd made a friend in Tommy, the bespectacled boy from the park, and Mrs. Lopez reported he was doing well in class, though he still kept most kids at arm's length. Scout remained his constant, the puppy's loyalty, a bridge between Ethan's guarded heart and the world. Michael, too, had changed. His once empty evenings now revolved around bedtime stories, diaper changes, and teaching Ethan to toss a ball without flinching. The apartment, once a pit stop between shifts, felt like a home, its walls echoing with Lily's babbles and Scout's playful yips. But that evening, as Michael cleared the dinner plates, spaghetti, Ethan's new favorite, a white envelope on the counter caught his eye. Its return address bore a name he'd seen in the social worker's files, Sarah, Ethan and Lily's mother. His stomach twisted. The letter had arrived that morning, and he'd debated all day whether to open it. Ethan, wiping his hands on a dish towel, noticed Michael's pause. "What's that?" he asked, his voice curious but edged with caution. Scout, sensing the shift, trotted to Ethan's side, tail still. Michael set the plates down, his heart heavy. He'd promised himself to be honest with Ethan, to give him choices where life had offered none. "It's from your mom," he said, gently, sliding the envelope toward Ethan. The boy's face paled, his fingers freezing on the towel. Scout whined, nudging Ethan's leg, but Ethan didn't move, his eyes locked on the looping handwriting. Michael knelt beside him, keeping his voice steady. "You don't have to read it if you're not ready. It's your call." Ethan swallowed, his jaw tight, and after a long moment he reached for the envelope, his hands trembling. The letter was short, written in uneven script. Ethan read silently, his expression unreadable, but Michael saw the way his shoulders hunched, as if bracing for a blow. When he finished, Ethan folded the paper and dropped it onto the table, his movements deliberate. "She says she's sorry," he said, his voice flat. "Says she's getting better, wants to see us." He looked at Scout, who pressed closer, then at Michael. "She always said stuff like that. Things will be better tomorrow, but she left us." The words carried the weight of countless broken promises, of nights spent hungry and scared. Michael's chest ached, anger at Sarah's abandonment, mixing with pride in Ethan's clarity. "What do you think?" he asked, careful not to sway him. Ethan's fingers found Scout's fur, gripping tightly. "She doesn't mean it," he said, his voice stronger now. "If she did, she'd have come back before." He pushed the letter away, letting it slide to the table's edge. "I don't want to see her." Scout licked his hand, and Ethan's lips twitched in a faint smile, a flicker of relief breaking through his resolve. Michael nodded, respecting Ethan's choice. "Okay, buddy. We'll focus on what's here. You, Lily, Scout, me." He placed a hand on Ethan's shoulder, feeling the boy lean into the touch, a small but significant shift. Later that night, as Michael tucked Lily into her crib, Ethan lingered in the doorway, Scout at his heels. "You're not going to leave, right?" Ethan asked, his voice barely above a whisper, eyes searching Michael's face. Michael knelt, meeting his gaze. "Never, Ethan. I'm your family now." Ethan nodded, his expression softening, and for the first time he didn't look like he was waiting for someone else to return. The moment solidified Michael's commitment. He'd been fostering out of duty, then affection, but now it was more a fierce determination to be the father these kids deserved. Scout, curled up beside Ethan's bed that night, seemed to sense the change, his contented sigh a quiet seal on their new bond. The letter, discarded in the trash, was a closed chapter, but the future, with its challenges and joys, lay wide open. The courthouse loomed against the crisp November sky, its stone steps gleaming under the morning sun as Michael Carter adjusted the collar of Ethan's light blue dress shirt. Ethan, now 10, stood rigid, his fingers fidgeting with the buttons, his dark hair neatly combed for the occasion. 2-year-old Lily squirmed in Michael's arms, tugging at his tie with a giggle, while Scout, the scruffy grey puppy turned loyal companion, sat proudly at Ethan's side, his leash looped around the boy's wrist. The past 3 months had transformed their lives. Ethan's cautious trust had blossomed. Lily's health had stabilized, and Michael's apartment was now a home filled with laughter and love. Today they were here to make it official. Adoption Day. Inside, the courtroom's polished wooden benches glowed under fluorescent lights, and the air carried a quiet solemnity. Ethan sat beside Michael, one hand buried in Scout's fur, the other clutching Lily's tiny sneaker as she nestled in Michael's lap. Scout's tail thumped softly, his amber eyes calm but alert, as if he understood the weight of the moment. Michael's heart raced, not from nerves, but from a joy so deep it felt like it might burst. The journey from that fateful night, when Scout led him to Ethan and Lily in a desolate apartment, had been long, marked by sleepless nights, social worker visits, and Ethan's slow, hard-won smiles. But every step had led here. The judge, a woman with silver-rimmed glasses and a kind smile, looked down from her bench. "Ethan," she said gently, "this is a big day. I need to ask you something important. Do you want Michael Carter to be your legal father?" Ethan's breath hitched, his fingers tightening in Scout's fur. The room fell silent, the only sound the soft creak of a bench as Ms. Harper, the social worker, leaned forward. Ethan glanced at Michael, then at Lily, who babbled, "Mika," her version of his name. Scout nudged his hand, and Ethan's shoulders squared. "Yes," he said, his voice clear and strong, ringing with a certainty that filled Michael's eyes with tears. The judge's pen scratched across the documents, each stroke sealing their bond. "By the power vested in me," she said, "I hereby grant the adoption of Ethan and Lily to Michael Carter." A ripple of applause broke out from the small group in attendance, Michael's fire station crew, Mrs. Lopez, and Tommy's family. Ethan's cheeks flushed, but he grinned, a real smile that reached his eyes. Michael ruffled his hair, the formality melting away. "How's it feel, kid?" he asked as they stepped outside, the autumn air cool against their faces. Ethan looked up, sunlight catching in his eyes. "Like I belong somewhere," he said, his voice soft but sure. Back home, the apartment buzzed with the warmth of a family picnic. Michael's backyard, once a patch of grass, was now a haven of laughter. Ethan and Tommy kicked a soccer ball, Scout darting between them, barking with delight. Lily toddled, after clutching a stuffed bunny, her giggles echoing as Michael's crew chief Rosa chased her playfully. The table was laden with burgers, lemonade, and a chocolate cake Ethan had helped bake, its slightly lopsided layers a testament to their teamwork. Scout, ever the opportunist, hovered near the grill, earning a pat from Michael. "You started this, buddy," he murmured, scratching the puppy's ears. As the sun dipped low, painting the sky in shades of orange, Michael watched his family, Ethan's carefree laughter, Lily's fearless exploration, Scout's unwavering loyalty. The emptiness that once defined his nights was gone, replaced by a fullness he'd never imagined. Ethan ran over, breathless, and hugged Michael tightly, a gesture that had become natural. "Thanks, Dad," he said, the words slipping out effortlessly for the first time. Michael's throat tightened, and he hugged back, feeling Lily's small hand pat his leg and Scout's warm presence beside them. This was home, built on a stray's courage and a promise kept. The scent of roasting turkey and cinnamon-spiced pie filled Michael Carter's apartment, transforming the small space into a haven of warmth as November's chill settled outside. The kitchen counter was a cheerful chaos of ingredients, freshly baked rolls, mashed potatoes, and a cranberry sauce can that Ethan, now 10, had proudly opened with only minor spillage. Michael stirred gravy at the stove, glancing at Ethan, who lingered in the doorway, absently stroking Scout's scruffy grey fur. 2-year-old Lily babbled from her high chair, waving a spoon like a tiny conductor. This was their first Thanksgiving as a family, a milestone since the adoption that had made Ethan and Lily officially Michael's children, with Scout as their ever-loyal guardian. Ethan's eyes followed Michael's movements, curious but hesitant, as if the idea of a holiday meal was a foreign language. "We never had Thanksgiving before," he admitted quietly, his fingers tightening in Scout's fur. Michael paused, his heart aching at the glimpse of Ethan's past, a life of empty cupboards and broken promises. He smiled warmly, setting down the spoon. "Then we'll make this one the best yet. Want to help with the stuffing?" Ethan's face brightened and he nodded, stepping forward with Scout trotting at his heels, tail wagging hopefully at the prospect of dropped crumbs. The afternoon buzzed with the arrival of guests, Michael's fire station crew, Mrs. Lopez, and Tommy's family, their laughter blending with the clink of glasses and Lily's delighted squeals. The dining table, usually too big for three, now groaned under the weight of dishes, its mismatched chairs filled with people who'd become family. Ethan sat between Michael and Tommy, Scout nestled under his chair, occasionally sneaking a peek at the turkey. Before eating, Michael raised his glass. "Let's share what we're thankful for," he said. Rosa spoke of her kids, Mrs. Lopez of her students. When Ethan's turn came, he shifted uncomfortably, his fingers twisting his napkin. "I'm thankful for Scout," he mumbled, then glanced at Michael, his voice softer. "And Dad." The word, now familiar, still sent a warmth through Michael's chest. As the meal wound down, Ethan carried his plate to the sink without prompting, a small act that spoke volumes about his growing sense of home. Michael watched from the doorway, pride swelling. But later, as he cleaned up, a crisp white envelope in the trash caught his eye. Sarah's handwriting, another letter from Ethan's mother. His stomach tightened. He'd seen it arrive days ago but left it for Ethan to handle. Quietly, he retrieved it, its seal unbroken, and found Ethan in the living room reading to Lily with Scout curled beside him. "Ethan," Michael said gently, holding out the envelope, "this is from your mom. You don't have to read it, but it's your choice." Ethan's face stilled, his hand pausing on Scout's fur. He took the envelope, turning it over, his expression unreadable. Scout whined, pressing closer, and Ethan's jaw tightened. "She says she's changed," he said, voice flat, as if reciting a script he'd heard too often. "Wants to visit." He tore the letter in half, letting the pieces fall to the floor. "She left us, you didn't." The words were firm, a boy's wisdom honed by pain. Michael knelt, meeting his eyes. "You sure?" Ethan nodded, his gaze steady. "I've got you, Lily and Scout. That's enough." That night, as Michael tucked Ethan into bed, Scout jumped up, settling against the boy's side. Ethan fidgeted with his blanket, then looked up, his voice quiet but clear. "Love you, Dad." Michael's eyes stung as he hugged him tightly. "Love you too, kid." In the soft glow of the rocket nightlight, Ethan drifted off, Scout's gentle snores a steady rhythm. Michael paused at the door, Lily's soft breathing echoing through the baby monitor. A year ago, Scout had led him to two scared kids in a dark apartment. Now they were a family, bound by love and a puppy's courage, ready for whatever tomorrow brought.